This is Pete Fletzer. On this episode of Around the Galaxy, we're talking to Matt Martin from the Lucasfilm Story Group.
Do actually have positive experiences with fans, and the vast majority of Star Wars fans are so awesome and so great, and let me experience Star Wars through them.
You're listening to Around the Galaxy.
Welcome to episode number 141 of Around the Galaxy, the Star Wars fan talk show. I am your host, Pete Fletzer. Thank you so much for joining us. If this is your first visit with Around the Galaxy, well, welcome aboard. We are so glad you could join us. And hey, while you're here, before you forget, hit that subscribe button so that not only will you get Around the Galaxy in your feed every Tuesday, but also on Saturday mornings, we bring you a show called Disturbances in the Force. And on Disturbances in the Force, we bring you all the Star Wars news from the previous week in about 5 minutes. Real quick, real easy, no spin, no clickbait, just the news, just the things that have gone on. Before we get to the show today, though, I would just want to take one quick moment to recap and say thank you to everybody who was a part of Podathon 2021. That happened this past weekend. Last year, we raised $2,000 for the Make-A-Wish Foundation. And this year, through the generosity of the fans who listened all day, to the YouTubers and podcasters who gave their time to be part of the event, to people like Lucasfilm and Disney Books and Regal Robot and Inside Editions and Steve Anderson, people who gave things to be raffled off, we raised over $8,300 for the Make-A-Wish Foundation, all sort of proving the point that Star Wars fans are amazing people who really care and who give back. So thank you to everybody who was a part of that, and thank you if you donated. We can't thank you enough for helping us hit that special milestone and bring a chance to dream for a child who needs it more than anybody else. Well, speaking of Podathon, one of the interviews that we were fortunate enough to bring was I had the chance to speak to Matt Martin from the Lucasfilm Story Group. Matt has been with Lucasfilm for almost 15 years and came up through purchasing and ended up now responsible for a great deal of the lore. He works very closely with the parks and things like that. We're going to get his whole story. I don't need to give it here. You're going to hear it here in the interview. But it was a real privilege and a pleasure to speak to Matt. Matt does not normally speak to podcasts that often, but as he said in our email conversations back and forth, it's for charity. So thank you, Matt, for doing that. I'm really excited to bring that interview to you now.
Whoa. Are we doing my thing this week?
Oh, yeah, I'm sorry, AT. Yes, I'm very excited now to introduce our resident battle droid to read one of your reviews, ATG3.
Well, thank you for having me.
I'm so glad you're here.
I will note that you did not have me on Podathon at all.
You
were on screen for like 15 straight hours.
It was a packed day.
You didn't even bring me on.
No, there was a lot going on.
No, I'm not offended.
Oh, okay, good. You shouldn't be offended.
Look, at the end of the day,
right,
you raised money for charity, and the Make-A-Wish Foundation is phenomenal.
Right.
So good on you for that.
Thank you.
I'm just saying, I'm a little bit offended.
Okay. We had so many things going on that day.
Look, I have bits that
did.
I wrote. I was all excited.
Well, go ahead and do one. Let's hear what.
Okay, I'll do one.
Okay.
There once was a droid from Nantucket.
Okay, no, stop right there.
Yeah,
Stop.
No,
yes,
you're right.
no, that's
that probably wasn't appropriate.
Thank you very much.
Okay, well, let me get to this review.
Oh, please.
This week's review comes to us from Apple Podcasts, and it's from somebody named Pat and Charles from the Conversations podcast. You see, they were really clever, and they put the letters SW, like for Star Wars, in the middle of the word conversations, which not only is clever, but it makes the word really hard to say.
Okay, come on.
Okay.
Let's go.
Well, they say, great show. Since becoming regular listeners, we've grown to appreciate the lengths to which Pete goes to try to be inclusive.
That's nice.
Except to droids, apparently.
Okay, see, stop.
Not always easy, but worthy.
Yeah, well, that's...
And so, I guess that's nice.
Yeah,
All right,
it is.
hey, we're going to bring you Matt Martin after these messages.
This is Matt Martin, and you're listening to Around the Galaxy.
Matt, thank you so much for joining us. How are you?
I'm good. Watching your intro video, I'm like, oh, you've talked to so many great people already.
And we're adding to it right now. Thank you. So, I know, first of all, thank you so much for being a part of this and supporting Podathon, and for Lucasfilm supporting it as well. It's I know you don't do a lot of podcasts and a lot of interviews, or at least lately anyway. So I really appreciate you taking the time to hang out with us today.
For sure.
Excellent. So, hey, listen, I imagine if people are watching this or listening to the broadcast later, they probably know who Matt Martin is, but maybe for that one person who's never heard of your name, maybe just give us a little bit about who you are and what you do.
I like that you think people know who I am.
Well, well, I want to ask you about that, but yeah, let me let you get that intro out of the way.
No, so I'm Matt. I've been with Lucasfilm for over 14 years now, so I'm creeping up on the 15-year mark, which at Disney gets us a cool little like statue thing, which is I'm actually pretty excited for. But I'm part of the story group. I've been with this team for I think 6 or 7 years now. Before that, I was part of the online team running social media and content on StarWars.com. And before that, I was the product developer and buyer for the online store, StarWarsShop.com, when that was a thing that existed.
Wow, 14 years. So you started when you were like, what, 6 years old, 7 years old?
Yeah, it was a while ago.
You've got that sort of perennial, that youthful look, which is great.
Definitely. And I feel like when I got there, I'm like, oh wow, I'm one of the kids, and now I feel. Thankfully, I still look young, but I feel like I'm an elder statesman at this point compared to some of the folks.
So you've been there for quite some. So maybe, like, how does I was going to say let's start with how you got there, but let's go even further back. And I imagine you were a Star Wars fan first. Tell me about your earliest Star Wars experiences.
Sure. Yeah. So I've been a giant Star Wars fan for most of my life that I remember. But I'm one of those kind of rare people that got into Star Wars during that time where Star Wars wasn't popular. And I feel like a lot of people probably don't even remember that was a time that ever existed. But between Return of the Jedi and like the Thrawn trilogy, no one cared about Star Wars but seemingly me. And I got into it actually because I went to a friend's. I mean, I knew about Star Wars. Obviously, it was part of the zeitgeist. But I got into it because I went to a friend's sleepover one night, like down the street from my house, and randomly we decided to put on a bootleg VHS of Return of the Jedi. Pretty late at night, everyone fell asleep, and I was just enthralled. Like, I don't think it was the first time I'd ever seen the film, but it was the first time that I was at an age where it really connected with me. And I was so into it that I actually left the sleepover, walked home, and proceeded to watch A New Hope and Empire that same night from my dad's VHS copies of them. And then I actually continued to watch one of those movies every single night until I think I was like 16 or something.
Yeah. You bring up an interesting thing. It's funny because there's sort of this time gap, and it's funny, as I've been doing the show for a while, we always kind of talk about the dark times, right? When there was no Star Wars between a Jedi and of course the Return to the Phantom Menace. But in that gap, there was like a very dark time, because the more we've been talking about it lately, the more we've been sort of realizing, the EU stuff started to happen. So it wasn't really completely empty, though, for those that really want to do it. But there was like probably a good 6 years where like virtually nothing before, Kevin J. Anderson's books started to come out and Zahn's books. So that was an interesting time. And I think people forget, there was a time when it was almost uncool to be a Star Wars fan. And that doesn't even seem possible now.
Yep. It was a really difficult time to get into it because, I was that type of person, and I still am, that wants to like swallow up every piece of content and everything I can get my hands on. And there wasn't anything. So like I got the West End Games source books, and I've never played an RPG, still haven't really played an RPG in my life, but I just read them just like they were like novels to me, because they were just cool information on Star Wars. Or like my mom, bless her heart, went to garage sales every weekend trying to find Star Wars toys that I could play with. And, thanks to that, I have a pretty decent, Kenner collection,
Yeah.
which is mostly secondhand, but it was during that time where secondhand, no one wanted them, unlike
Right.
now.
Yeah, I look back at the stuff that I sold at garage sales for like $3, and I'm like, oh my gosh, why did I why did I get rid of that stuff? But it was, I mean, it was, and there was no indication that anything was going to be coming down the pike. So yeah, it was quite a different time. And so you said you were around 16 at that point, and then so where did you?
I was
What did
16 by the when I think I was 8 when I that sleepover. I was 7 or 8 or something like that, and then it was from that time until I was like 16 that I literally watched them every single night.
Mm.
At that point, I guess I was still pretty into Star Wars, but I had other interests and other things to watch, so I didn't need to only watch 3 movies every night.
Right. Yeah, time to expand those horizons. And when you're 16, you're getting interested in other things that are happening. But so you did you read a lot of the EU books when they came out? Were you a big
Oh
EU
yeah,
fan? Yeah.
yeah. I read basically all of them as they came out. Starting with the Thrawn trilogy, and I was pretty young at the time, so those were tough books to read.
Mm.
So I did read them, but I was a kid, and I don't think I got them quite as much until I reread them, a few years later.
Yeah.
And I think the ones that I connected with the most at that time, which I connect with the least now, are the Jedi Prince series, like like Glove of Darth Vader and all of those, which upon reflection are pretty terrible. But at the time, they were the one thing that was actually aimed at kind of people my age.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's kind of an interesting thing. And I think that's one of the things people forget when the conversation comes up about the EU kind of being quote unquote decanonized, is there was so much of it, and there was no story group. There was nobody keeping that all in line. When Kevin J. Anderson was on the show, he was telling me, like, literally he would pick up the phone and call Timothy Zahn and be like, what are you doing with this character? Because I'm thinking about going over there. And so a lot of the stuff in hindsight, and maybe as somebody as a story group, a member of the story group, when you look back at that stuff, how does it strike you? Are there things that like make you laugh, or is it kind of, how do you look back on that stuff?
Generally really fondly. I thought they did a really remarkable job. Like there would be inconsistencies. There's inconsistencies now, even with us there. It's, with the amount of content you're doing, it's just sort of impossible to avoid. But I thought that they did a pretty remarkable job of communicating. And I give a lot of credit to, like Suter Stoney and the editors at the time, and Leland, who's now part of the story group, but he was helping track a lot of that information, even, during the EU. So it's, I have nothing but really fond memories of the EU. And, I'm not, like when I remember things, I don't really remember them visually. So when I think back of EU things, and there are a few scenes from old books that like pop out in my head almost visually, and it's like, that's remarkable because that's not how I remember things.
Yeah, they were a little bit of everything, and it's interesting to watch how the fandom has kind of like, there's sort of 3 categories. I think there's the people who are just angry, and I get it. They gave a lot of years to these stories, and then there's the people who are kind of in the middle, like I kind of put myself in. I'm disappointed that some of those stories aren't happening, but the reality is, if you're paying attention to the content that's coming out now, it's happening in different ways, I think. And then there's people who just were like, yep, I didn't read those, so I get to start over and I get to start fresh, which is cool. And it's really neat that we have that opportunity in Star Wars. Maybe before I ask you some more questions about that, maybe tell me a little bit about how do you describe the story group? It's this mythical thing that people love to throw around in social media. The story group did this and the story group did that. And sometimes even the authors I've spoken to reference the story group, but what is it? How would you describe it?
It's a difficult thing to describe, and I don't want to get too deep into it, but there's sort of 2 parts, which is, one is sort of helping manage the franchise strategically, which is a whole thing in and of itself. And then there's also a group within the story group that are kind of like, the real continuity and lore nerds of the group that are there to kind of act as in a way, consultants on various projects to help ensure all of the Star Wars things are buttoned up, connecting to things that we know are coming, but other creators are not aware of, or helping storytellers avoid doing the same thing twice, because there's so many different stories going on at one time that, there has to be kind of a centralized group that sort of has eyes on everything.
Mm-hmm. And so what part of that story group do you play?
So I'm in kind of an interesting place because it's sort of a hybrid, where from kind of the franchise side of things, on the franchise story group, I'm lead for, let's see, Disney Parks, Publishing, ILM X Lab, and Online. Mm-hmm. So all of those, I work with our various partners, either internally or externally, to manage kind of the slates for those various things and the strategies for those various things, partnered with 1,000 other people that are working really hard on all of this stuff. And then I also do kind of just story development and continuity / lore for all of those things, plus animation and video games.
Wow. So do you find that your EU knowledge is help or a hindrance to managing some of the lore?
Usually a help, because usually it's good. The EU did so many things right, and there's a lot of things that just aren't worth reinventing. Mm-hmm. Like the details of a planet or something like that. There's no reason to make it different. So it's nice having the EU knowledge from that point of view. But there are the rare occasions where I'm like, I feel like we can't do that thing because of this story, but I don't remember which story it was. And maybe it was EU, so it's fine to do it,
That's gonna be rough.
Yeah, it's like I wish I had, like, Pablo Hidalgo has just like this like perfect memory of all things that have ever happened that he's ever experienced in his life or read, and I don't have that. So it's like like sometimes I'll just hit him up and be like, Pablo, what story did this happen in? I know it happened, but which one? And off the top of his head, he'll know it.
He'll be like, no, that was Truce of Picoro. We can move on from that.
Yeah, exactly.
It's funny. I have this thing where I think I'm going to start trying to throw Truce of Picoro in every single one of my episodes. Last week, David W. Collins mentioned it. I'm going to throw it in. We're going with that.
I love Truce of Picoro. It's such a fun one.
It really is. It's definitely it's one that I feel like still, if I was to pick up and go back to those, I might go back. I might even start with that one. Now I'm going to have
it's a logical starting place because it's pretty close to Return of the Jedi.
Yeah. All right. See, now it's going to be my thing. It's going to become my entire personality. It's going to become Truce, because that's how you manage your Star Wars fandom. I don't know if you're aware of that, Matt. You have to really. I don't know where I'm going with that.
You're going to be the Truce of Picoro guy.
That's right. If you have any and if you're working on something, Matt, and you got a question, you can just pick up the phone and you can call me.
Hi, this is David W. Collins, and you're listening to Around the Galaxy.
But so, as somebody who was a Star Wars fan, how did you end up going from those other pieces of the business? And look, I understand the way companies work. You start here, you move there. But how did you go about becoming a part of the story group? And when did the story group start? Because that's still relatively new, I guess, right?
Yeah. I mean, it started in, I guess, 2012 to an extent. Mm-hmm. Right before the Disney acquisition. Do you want me to tell you the kind of the long story or the short story?
You can tell me the long story if you like. Sure.
Okay. Buckle up. So, I was a massive Star Wars fan, and when I was in college, I was also the chapter representative for my local Star Wars fan force, which was like the kind of sort of official fan clubs at the time. They were kind of like, I wouldn't say they were fully blessed by Lucasfilm, but they were winked at by Lucasfilm. Mm-hmm. And while I was in that position, there was a posting on one of our boards for volunteers for Comic-Con. And that was actually how I ended up getting in with the company to begin with. Was I volunteered at Comic-Con, like basically putting action figures in cases that we were selling. It wasn't a glamorous job, but it was fun. And through that, I continued being a volunteer for several years, met a lot of people from Lucasfilm. And I guess when I was, let's see, it was like 2005, 2006, something like that. The guys that ran StarWarsShop.com needed a freelance graphic designer, and conveniently, I was going to school for visual communications, which is basically graphic design. And so they called me up to do that, which was really rad. So I actually started at Lucasfilm as a freelancer, basically doing really, really boring kind of graphic design grunt work, like, banner ads and, product photos and things like that, just really basic stuff. And eventually the kind of my main contact decided that he was going to leave the company, and he was one of the buyers and product developers for the store. And completely on a whim, I put in for his job. I was like, I have no idea how to do buying. It's not my thing. Seems cool buying. Buffy Summers wanted to be a buyer. Why not? And so basically I applied and kind of positioned it as like, look, I know Star Wars super well. I know your products really well because I'm a Star Wars collector. I know your site really well because I've been working on it as a designer for, a couple years now. Maybe you can teach me the buying stuff. And John Friel, who was the kind of manager at the time, decided to bring me on because he figured that teaching the buying side of things is easier than teaching the Star Wars side of things.
It's true.
So, I was just really fortunate that John trusted me, and that, I'd had a rapport with him from conventions, and he knew, he saw something in me, which is awesome.
That's great.
So that's how I got in the first place. StarWarsShop.com was part of the StarWars.com team. So we were kind of like a satellite of the larger online team. And during the time where they were decided they didn't want to carry inventory anymore, which makes having a store very difficult.
You don't need to be a buyer to know that.
Exactly. During that time, it was clear that we were going to, kind of slowly start sunsetting Star Wars Shop, but the online team needed a new kind of content manager, which was ironically Pablo at the time was leaving or had just left or something like that, because he was in that role. And they knew kind of between my ability to write, my ability to know Star Wars very well, and kind of my managerial skills, they figured it would be a pretty decent job for me to fill. So I kind of just shifted pretty naturally over to the online team and continued to manage the content there. So that gets us through how I ended up on that team. Then it was kind of the early days of social media. We had pretty good social, honestly. And then they decided that they wanted to bring in an agency to take over, which, seemed like a good idea at the time. But because I was a content manager, I had to work with those agencies, and they weren't great. They didn't really know Star Wars super well, and a lot of the work was ending up on my plate anyway, because someone had to write that stuff or edit it heavily to make it work for, the fan audience that would be very discerning.
Right.
Until eventually I was just like, hey, how about you guys just let me hire someone to be kind of the day-to-day social person, and then the two of us can just run social instead of paying an agency. And they actually took me up on it, and that's actually how we got Andy Gutierrez,
awesome,
the Star Wars show host, because she was originally the person that I hired to work on social with me. So managed social, managed StarWars.com, produced all of the video content and everything for several years before eventually getting onto the story group, which was kind of interesting because that one happened where, and tell me if I'm just boring you because I can stop.
No, I'm loving it. I don't know if people listening are about
So the story group thing is really interesting, where the very first meeting that Kathy Kennedy ever had with the company, she stood up, said, she's, welcoming everybody. She's the president now. Everybody's excited to see her. And she's like, I'm putting together this story group to manage Star Wars storytelling. We're going to be making new Star Wars movies, which obviously was a big shock to all of us.
Yeah. Yeah.
And this was years, or not years, I guess, but it was a while before that was announced. It never leaked, which is awesome and a testament to Lucasfilm, I think.
Yeah.
But I turned to John, who was my manager at the time, and said, like, that's what I want to do. Like, that is where I want to be. I don't know how, but that's what I want to do. And then eventually I had the opportunity because they posted a job that was pretty perfect for me. And at the time it was really continuity focused. It's less of what I do now. And it was almost entirely continuity focused, similar to like Leland and Pablo. And I put in for that job and interviewed with the team. And I feel like I might've been the only person they actually interviewed. I'm not entirely sure, but I think they wanted somebody internally because they wanted somebody that not only understood Star Wars, but kind of understood, you know, the lay of the land and Lucasfilm and all internal politics and everything that is challenging to come into. But it was still a very nerve-wracking hiring process, getting grilled by a variety of people who I either kind of personally idolized, like Kiri Hart, who's like ridiculously brilliant person that it's intimidating to be in the room with her because she's so smart. And people that I had known and considered friends for years, like Pablo and Leland. Leland was the worst, man. He was brutal in that interview.
You're like, what are you doing to me, man? Like, just.
But it was great. It was great. And so, yeah, that's how I got on that team. That's
great. And you've been, when the story group started right around that time.
So the story group started in 2012, right before the Disney acquisition. The new canon launched in 2014, and I joined at the very beginning of 2016.
Okay.
So I was still in my social online job for Force Awakens, because I didn't want to leave. I actually got the job like in the fall of 2015, but I didn't want to leave my team out to dry while they're trying to launch, the biggest movie of all time, potentially.
Right.
So I worked it out to where I wouldn't start until January.
That's very considerate of you. Very good. Well, Matt, the good news is you got the job. Thank you for sitting through my job interview of you.
You were way nicer than Leland.
Yes, clearly. So as a Star Wars fan who's now in the story group, is it the best thing in the world or the worst to know things that are coming before they happen? Because you must know, I imagine I'm not going to even guess how far in advance and even ask you what you do and don't know, but you obviously have access to story concepts and threads way before they're put into play, either in books or movies or TV. Is that a good thing, or is that a bad thing?
It can go both ways. It's nice feeling like part of the process, but I haven't been able to just purely enjoy a piece of Star Wars fiction for a really, really long time, just purely as a fan. And that's a bummer, because that was something that I really looked forward to. I was somebody that lined up for, many, many hours / days for the prequels, things like that, which, I still enjoy them, obviously, but it's not quite the same when you already know everything that's going to happen, or you've seen bits and pieces. So even when you see the full cut, it's like, oh yeah, I remember that. But it's nice to be a part of the process. And it's funny where the projects that I don't really work as directly on and I don't know as much about, it's almost harder to watch those, because I almost watch them like almost flinchingly, where I'm like, please don't do anything that I would have hated.
Yeah.
Which rarely happens, but it's still like, I would have had a note about that little dumb thing.
Right. Do you ever like watch something and go, well, I guess we're going to have to go back and change that thing we were headed, or?
Yeah, occasionally, but it's rare, because usually we know things early enough to where that happens a lot, where we're like, oh, we probably should change that thing because of this thing. But it usually happens earlier in the process. It's rare that it's like, I'm seeing something at the same time that fans are seeing it and then have to go back and change something.
Yeah. Do your friends who are Star Wars fans, do they like ply you looking for information, or have they just given up on trying to get stuff from you?
Most people don't.
Yeah.
Like I don't. Most of them are either respectful, knowing that I can't talk, or care more about telling me what they think things should be.
Oh, like Twitter.
Yes.
Your friends are.
So
Twitter.
then I just sit there and be like, yeah, okay, sure, that's a good idea, or that doesn't work because this.
Yeah.
Sit down, let me explain to you why that doesn't work.
Let me tell you why that's yeah. No, we mentioned at the top, and you thought it was humorous that I felt like so many people would know who you are, and I think it's what's interesting to me is, first of all, you know, as I run this podcast and the audience expands, yes, there are probably, you know, in reality, there are people who probably don't even know that there is a story group, right? I mean, what me and Jerry Cable from the Bombad cast, we call normies, right? People who are just like, and it's so interesting, the people that I meet, I'll be wearing a Star Wars shirt and they'll be like, oh, I love Star Wars. And the conversation I have with them, I have to realize sometimes, and you probably have to too, times like, okay, yeah, I'm not going to dig into sort of the lore of Mandalore with them yet, because they're just still happy to see the guy in the silver armor, and that's awesome. Yep. So, but the reason I'm thinking about it is, and the reason I said what I did was the world of social media. There's this sort of concentric circles of fandom, and you are very active in social media, and sometimes it treats you extremely well, sometimes it doesn't. And so how do you handle that world? Because this social media, as I don't need to tell you, is, you know, people aren't afraid to say what they're thinking necessarily, and so you get both the good and the bad. So tell me a little bit about how you manage your social media presence.
It's, you know, it's interesting, and it's changed a lot over the years. I think as I've sort of stepped away from it to an extent, because I think there was a point where I felt more empowered to actually talk and share more deeper opinions. Mm-hmm. Where now I feel like I can't do that because somebody's going to turn it into a blog post, and then it's going to become a whole thing. Right. So it's a bummer.
Well, after people watch this, there's going to be so much Leland Chee hate. It's going to be
no one can hate Leland. Leland's too. He's just a pure soul. He's the best. So I'm not worried about Leland. But yeah, like it's interesting because now I feel, because I don't want to get into anything too deep, it just allows me to either interact with fans just as a fan, not mm-hmm. getting into lore, just being a fan and liking things, because I genuinely do like just about everything we do. Mm-hmm. And be able to make jokes or call out things that are funny. That's right. That's kind of all I can, do now, because like I said, anytime I say anything that's, it's not even that I say necessarily the wrong thing, but it's that people will deliberately take things wrong and turn them into something, which, it's frustrating. Right. So it's like, I definitely go through that, like, why am I on Twitter thing every couple months. Mm-hmm. Because I'm an introvert. I could probably leave social media and I'd be just fine. Like I could probably not leave my house for a while and I'd be pretty much just fine. Proved that last year. But then I'm reminded that I do actually have significantly more positive experiences with fans, and the vast majority of Star Wars fans are so awesome and so great and let me experience Star Wars through them in a way, to where kind of like what we were saying before, where I'm not really able to experience things as a fan anymore or enjoy them the way I used to be able to before this. I can do it through them. Mm-hmm. And that's almost as gratifying. And it's awesome when people are posting, fan art or costumes or something, or tattoos of things that I had like direct involvement on. There was I think I retweeted it, but there was some girl that got like 4 tattoos in one day, and all 4 of them were from different Star Wars projects, and all 4 of them were projects that I worked on. Oh, wow. And I was like, that's so cool. Like, the things that I was able to work on made such an impact on that one person. that, she went and got tattoos about it. And like, as a person with a bunch of tattoos, that's meaningful to me.
Right. Oh, that's great. Yeah. So I imagine are there times when you're just looking at things and what people are saying in social media and going, yes, I'm glad they like that. Is that,
Yes.
yeah.
There's a lot of that. I mean, there's more of that than anything. It's either me seeing people reacting positively to things or having interesting takes on things that are like genuinely thought-provoking takes that is like, oh, I worked on that and I didn't even think of that.
Right.
Which is cool. And people directly telling me things or asking me questions that are clearly coming from a really positive place, or just, it's awesome.
Do you ever take any of the thinking, and as you just referenced it, and it's a really interesting thought, do you ever think about things a little bit differently after you've seen the fan reaction? And I'm not saying you change the characters because of fan reaction. I think people like to believe that, and I don't think that happens. But does it ever sort of influence it? Maybe at the very least, like, people really like this character, so maybe we can explore them more, or anything like that?
Occasionally, it definitely helps me when I like a character. It helps me in a room be like, I'm not the only one. There are legions of fans of this character. We should use them. They are deserving of their own story here, and it definitely helps with kind of like anecdotal evidence in a way.
Sure.
Obviously, I don't have real data, but when I get to see people reacting positively to things, that helps. And it's rare that, or I guess it's pretty non-existent to where anybody would say something that we would actually go and change it.
Sure.
But there are occasions where people will point things out, usually things from like from the original films or from things that have long since come and gone. And people will point things out and I'll be like, oh, that's an angle I've never thought of. And that's something that I'm going to store because I think it's relevant.
And that's probably really, it's funny because I always think about, I was an English major for one semester in college because I had no attention span, still don't. But I used to think, like, did F. Scott Fitzgerald really put that much thought into all the symbolism we found? Or did it just kind of become something as a result of the scholarly look at it? And the whole stories now that exist around the stormtrooper who bumps his head on the Death Star and things like that, and so it's interesting to hear that at the very least you keep it in mind and say, maybe we come back to that at some point.
This is Jason Fry. You're listening to Around the Galaxy.
It's really fun to have those sort of philosophical conversations with fans online that they don't happen that often, but for me, at least, as a Star Wars fan, the things that have concrete answers are so much less interesting than the things that don't.
Right.
And so, sometimes people just ask me questions like, what ship was that in the background of this shot? And I might know the answer, I might not, but it's like, that's not a very interesting thing to answer. If I know it off the top of my head, I'll answer it, but
sure,
I'm probably not going to go research it for them. But if someone asks me something more philosophical about something like that doesn't have that clear answer, I'll give my opinion, I'll hear their opinion, and it becomes a whole thread of like really interesting stuff. I think actually it reminds me, there was a moment where we had a very long and incredibly engaging conversation with a bunch of people on Twitter about whether or not Luke Skywalker force choked those Gamorreans in the beginning of Jedi. Because I'm a staunch believer that he does not, but there are a lot of people that believe he 100% does, and there's evidence to both directions, I think. And it was just so fascinating to see everybody chiming in with their thoughts in such a like positive and constructive way. Never changed my opinion. I still say he doesn't. But like, I completely understand why people believe that he does, and it's the fact that it doesn't have a clear answer. That you go back and look at the script, and it does not say one way or the other. And I love that. And that's just one of those things that just, those are the types of things that keep me on social.
Well, I'm glad to hear that that's the kind of stuff that you're also interested in, because I think that takes away some of the magic and some of the excitement. I think that's why we love stories like Star Wars or Lord of the Rings or whatever story. As long as there's something to talk about and to put yourself into it, right? If there's definitive rules for everything, then it's math, right?
Yep.
This is not math. This is great storytelling with great opportunities to explore. And I also think, especially in today's world, it's really important that people can still have their own identity. Like Mark Hamill said about Luke Skywalker, if you think he's gay, then he's gay. That's awesome. And if not, that's awesome too. And so you don't necessarily need answers for everything. And I think that's where fan disappointment comes as well, right? Where there's this build up and this expectation, and then they don't get the answer in black and white. And sometimes that's better. And I think that's important to remember.
Yeah. And it's definitely, I think it's better for the future of the franchise, because the more explicit answers that we give, the more restrictive future storytelling becomes.
Yeah.
Not saying that we will never answer questions, like that is in itself pretty unsatisfying, but
right,
leaving the audience not questioning in a bad way, but just wondering,
right,
giving them room to think about it themselves and come up with what they think happened or what they think it should be, is just as powerful, more powerful than us just being like, yeah, this is what happened.
Yeah. And I think that's, I know you can't give a lot of detail as to what Story Group does, but I think it's important to me to recognize that it's not a group. It's not like this chamber of like 5 of you sitting in a circle and Jason Fry has to come in and say, can I do this? And you say yes or no. It's not that at all. It's more to make sure that it's a fun and easy to operate in playground, I think.
Yeah, it definitely is. I mean, Star Wars, probably more than it's really ever been, is so creator driven. And we're really there to help those creators, tell their best Star Wars story.
That's as a fan, what better job could you possibly ask for than to make that happen? So we have this 10 question segment that we throw at our guests every week, or almost every week. But who better than a member of the Story Group than to take part in our 10 question segment? So if you're up to it, I'm gonna throw them at you.
Sure. I hope it's not trivia.
It's not trivia. There's, as I always say, there's no wrong answers, and I won't judge you, but somebody probably will. So,
well, that's what the internet is for.
Exactly. So,
judging others.
Exactly. It's never me. Nobody goes on there and judges themselves, except against others, and then they have the bigger problem. So, okay. So the first question is, what's your favorite Star Wars movie, TV show, or book?
I mean, I guess it's still Empire Strikes Back. It's almost cliche to say it, but that movie just it kind of is successful in every way it could possibly be successful as a film.
Yeah.
So it's got to be that.
Yeah, it's one I always say, because not surprisingly, a lot of people say that, and it's the first choice for a reason, right? So absolutely, and it happens to be mine as well. What's your favorite non-Star Wars movie?
Ooh, that's so hard. I'm a big movie person. Like I'm a person that's in a movie theater probably 3 times a week at least. It's okay. I can give you. Let's go with a top 5 in no particular order, because I can't even narrow down to a top 1.
Okay, but, perfect.
Ghostbusters, Wayne's World, The Exorcist, Raiders, and Jaws.
Wow, that is a great list. Raiders and Jaws are on my top 5 as well. That is an awesome list. Did you have you seen Dune yet?
I did, yeah.
You must have. I mean, if you're in the theater every week, and
yeah.
How did you respond to that?
I really, really enjoyed it. I like Denis Villeneuve's whole thing. Like he just is such a great filmmaker, and I actually like the David Lynch Dune.
Yeah,
and I mean I like David Lynch.
Yeah,
and so his Dune is cool, and that's my main entry point to that franchise. I haven't read the books. I know about them, but I've never read them cover to cover. But I was so impressed with how this is such a stupid story nerd thing,
Yeah.
but I was so impressed with how Dune was able to get in so much complicated world building and complicated exposition at the beginning of that movie in a way that doesn't feel boring or complicated or like exposition.
Right.
Like,
Yeah.
it was just like a masterclass in how to deliver exposition interestingly.
Yeah, and and at the same time, it looked great and it sounded great. Now, I'm not one of those people who says you have to go to see a movie in a theater to enjoy it, but I would say it's a very different experience in the theater versus at home. I've done both, and they're two different movies, and it's great. And it's funny. My most successful tweet of all time just happened because I posted that some people are saying it would be great to give Denny a Star Wars film. What do you think? And I mean, the answers were all over the board, from
Sure.
yes, do it tomorrow, to I don't think he would know how to handle that, to I don't want him playing in Star Wars. And so, but it's interesting. I honestly don't know. I mean, I don't know that it's the right place for him because of the style of movie he does. What he does is Arrival, I think, is still one of the best untalked about movies that has come out in a while. So
yeah. I mean, I will preface this by saying that I don't work on live action very much, and I have absolutely no say in the creative talent that they choose. So with that out there, he wouldn't be my top choice for a Star Wars movie.
Yeah.
I like I said, I love him as a filmmaker, but I feel like he has yet to prove that he can do like the more pulpy, fun action adventure.
Yeah.
That I think Star Wars really need. Like, it's really in Star Wars DNA to have that pulp, and his stuff is very serious, bordering on somber.
Yeah. Which is why Dune works so perfectly.
It's just a different tone.
Right. Yeah. Dune is that. I mean, even when it's a book that I have never really made it all the way through, but he captured the feel of it very well, which is so important. And so, okay, cool. Describe Star Wars in 3 words or less.
I can do it in 1 word, which is hope.
Hope. There you go.
I feel like that is everything about Star Wars. It's the feeling that the audience gets. It's the feeling that propels the story. It's the feeling that propels the characters. It's all about hope.
That's great. That's fantastic. What's your favorite Star Wars sound effect?
Probably TIE fighters. Like the just it's just like, it's a really pleasant sound to me. There was a while back where they were saying that, like, when electric cars were first becoming a thing and people were worried about them being so quiet, that people were like rigging their cars to have sound effects, and there was a lot of jokes about making their cars sound like TIE fighters. And I'm like, yeah, I could really get behind that.
Can you imagine you're sitting there at a light and then you hear a TIE fighter coming up behind you?
I guess it would probably make you nervous.
would make me nervous. Most people, they wouldn't pick up on it. But cool. Who is I'm never sure if it's who or what is your favorite droid?
I would go with who for the just to get that out there, because we always treat droids like characters, so they're who's. Probably BD1, actually.
Oh,
who
really?
I actually have behind me. He's right there.
I need one of those. Where do I get one of those? That's
yeah. I actually don't know. My girlfriend got it for me for Christmas.
That's awesome.
Probably
Etsy. The answer to right now, I'm looking for a battle droid head, because there's a little character that's at the beginning of every one of my episodes, and he's a battle droid, and I just we got to add it to this menagerie behind me.
That would be great.
But Etsy is probably the best place, or a 3D printer, which I don't have
which is probably all the people on
right. I'll pay somebody else to 3D print it, right? Which Star Wars character would you most like to be, and why?
Most like to be?
Yeah, if you can be any character.
I mean, probably Leia. She's the epitome of everything I wish I could be.
Yeah.
So I guess if I could transform myself into a character, it would be her.
Yeah. That's yeah. I mean, if hope is how you describe Star Wars, then you almost have to say Leia, right?
Yep.
She's yeah, just and it's interesting to me, right? So one of the very first episodes I did, I interviewed a friend of mine who's an author, and we talked about how Leia affected him as a kid when he saw her in 1977 in the theaters, and she was such a kick-ass character. And if you think about it, back in 1977, you have one woman with two men. Normally she would have been like bikini clad and like, oh, save me, but she was like, no way,
Yep.
give me the gun, I'm taking over. And that was so transformative, not just for Star Wars, but for storytelling. I mean, I always say without her, you don't get Ripley, you don't get you don't get some of the great women characters of the early 80s that
Yep.
now, of
Definitely.
course, today luckily we have so many more choices of our characters. But yeah, she's and at the same time super tender and super gentle, and somebody that you felt like. I always think, when I think of Leia, I think of two different Leias. I think of General Leia from the sequels, which I just felt was so cool to see Carrie Fisher that way, and the evolved, while still not separate. But then I always think of Leia on Endor when she's talking to Luke and she's got the long hair and they're going through they're rediscovering each other, because I felt like that was a strong but very gentle character, and I thought that was amazing work by Carrie Fisher, of course.
Yep. That's probably the most vulnerable we ever see her, because she's a relatively guarded character, because she has to be, growing up as basically a politician.
Yeah.
But that she's got such a heart deep down, and in that scene is it's really where it comes to the forefront.
Yeah, it's so great, good call. What's your favorite Star Wars collectible? I'm looking at a wall behind you of things. What's
it's funny, I don't have that much Star Wars here. Most of my Star Wars collection is actually at my mom's house, because I have an entire room there and a lot of boxes in the garage that I don't have room for here. But I guess my favorite collectible is, let's see. I've got the Master Replica's Luke Empire Saber.
Oh, okay. Wow.
Which was like the thing I always wanted as a kid. That specific saber. And eventually when Master Replicas came out with it, I got it for Christmas. And that has kind of been I don't think it's almost certainly not the most valuable thing I have. But it's the thing I wanted the most. And eventually when I got it, it was, it meant a lot and still means a lot. And it probably has the best location in my house of all of the little bit of Star Wars that I do have around.
What do you think it is? And I this is a question I ponder a lot and don't have an answer for, but what do you think it is about Star Wars that makes people want to own a piece of it, right? Like Star Trek fans, they have their whatever they collect, and I don't feel like they're known for being collectors, but there's something about I mean, it inspired me to spend way more money than I should on Black Series helmets. What do you think it is? What is about Star Wars?
I think it's because it was part of the Star Wars DNA. Like it was the first movie that was really merchandised in that way. And like what other film could possibly have sold an empty box for Christmas?
Right.
But Star Wars did, and I think it just starts with that, where it's like there was a generation of kids, like the generation before mine, that grew up with access to Star Wars toys, and then there's just always been those toys. And so there are, at this point, there's toys and merchandise and various products and collectibles for pretty much everything, every halfway large movie that comes out. I mean, Funko Pops make it for movies that are dead on arrival.
Right. Yeah. Right.
But Star Wars, it's just always like it's a part of it. There's a part of Star Wars fan culture that is collecting, and I think it's probably hard to find anyone that considers themselves a Star Wars fan that doesn't own at least one Star Wars related tchotchke. If it's a t-shirt or a little Grogu keychain or whatever.
Yeah. Excellent. Couple more here. If you could own any spaceship or vehicle from the Star Wars universe, what would it be?
Ooh, that's a good one. Generally, I say my favorite is an X-wing, but I don't think I would if I was gonna own one. I don't know if I'd want to own one because they're probably not that comfortable. I mean, I guess Lando's Falcon.
Okay.
That looks like a place that I could live in. It's a great ship, but it's also like, nicely kept up.
Right. Yeah.
As opposed to Han's Falcon, which is less that.
Right. Yeah. What was it like for you as somebody who was working in theme parks when you saw the Falcon for the first time at Disney?
Oh, it was mind blowing. I mean, it was actually, I vividly remember it because I saw it. Obviously, I worked on Galaxy's Edge almost from the beginning of the project. So I knew it was coming. I'd been seeing these pictures of this crazy Falcon in China getting built. But I was on site while it was still under construction, and we were shooting something. I can't even remember what it was, but we were shooting something. I was there, just to be like the rep on set for the shot or for the shoot. And we were shooting it in the queue of Smuggler's Run because it was just like a nice environment that was more or less done. While most everything else, you still had to have a hard hat and everything on. And I don't know if you've been through that queue, but
yeah,
it's kind of confusing if you're not just going from where you leave the attraction to the exit. If you have the ability to walk freely through it, it's easy to get lost. And I did. And I walked out of an exit where I didn't know there was an exit, and like just stepped out, and there was the Falcon, and I was just like, whoa. And I'd seen the Falcon, like on set. Like I was on set for Solo, so I saw that version of the Falcon, which was not the full thing, but it was still full size, which was impressive. But when I saw it there, it was just like, that is the Falcon in every way, shape, and form. That is it. And it was really mind blowing. I definitely shed a tear. I'm glad I wandered down that aisle myself. No one could see like the one Lucasfilm representative on site tearing up at their Falcon.
was it Doug Chang that said like that is the definitive Falcon? Like they've taken all the pieces and that's the one, right?
Yeah, and it's the only time it's ever been built full scale, full size.
Right.
Like it's been built in pieces in the past, full scale, but it's never been the entire ship full scale.
That's cool. I remember coming around the corner. I've only been to the one in Anaheim, and I remember coming around the corner and just being like, there it is. That like my childhood dream, like from little 7-year-old Pete, like, wow, there it is. It's pretty wild. What's your favorite Star Wars moment?
Like in the films or personally?
I usually mean it around story, but give me both.
In the films, it's probably the "I love you, I know" scene. I just love the way it's acted. I love the lighting. It's it's an emotional beat that really, really works. My favorite Star Wars moment personally is harder because I've had so many great ones, especially being in this job. I've been afforded a lot of cool opportunities and got to see some really cool things.
Yeah.
I actually think it was when I was on the online team at Celebration, whichever the 2015 one was. And it was actually, I was running social at the time, and we had a really great volunteer with us, fan volunteer who was going over and above at our booth, at the big cantina booth that we had. And because they were going so over and above as a volunteer, they missed the reveal of the Rebels trailer, and they weren't able to see it. And I found out that night, like while we were backstage shortly after the con had closed, and he was like, "Oh, I missed the Rebels trailer. That was the thing I was most excited for of everything here, and I missed the Rebels trailer because I was working for you guys."
Yeah.
And it worked out because I had the trailer on my computer, because I was the one that also had to put it online. So we turned off all the lights in our little back room and sat him in front of my little laptop and pressed play on that trailer, and I got to watch him react to like Rex coming back.
Yeah.
And things like this, and he's freaking out, and like that was probably my favorite moment that I've had. And it was just completely watching him enjoy Star Wars.
Wow. That's an awesome moment. That's great. Can't top that. And it's about people enjoying it. So that's what's awesome.
Yeah.
Um,
I'm sorry, I got like weird Jesus rays over here.
it's the power of actually it's some industrial light and magic going on right
yeah,
there.
Exactly.
What is your go-to Star Wars quote?
I have a bad feeling about this. Definitely. I actually own that URL. Yeah. So like badfeelingaboutthis.com is a thing that I own, that I've owned since, I don't know, the early 2000s.
That's funny. Well, I love that quote so much that I'm buying the URL. That's
yeah.
amazing.
It was actually when I was in college. It was we had to make a portfolio website, and that was my portfolio website.
Mm-hmm.
And they're all like, "This isn't a good URL for a portfolio website because it's like got a negative connotation." And I'm like, but that's the joke though.
But it does. It's kind of positive. Yeah, that's great. Well, Matt, thank you so much for spending some time with us. Thank you for giving your time for Podathon and for Make-A-Wish, and I really appreciate it. My son's so excited he popped in the door.
Bye.
Matt, tell people where they can find you online.
I mean, I guess if you must find me online, I'm on Twitter as @missingwords. I'm on Instagram, but I don't post all that often, but I'm there, which is Matthew C. Martin. I wish I could have been @missingwords there because I'm usually @missingwords, but that was taken. So if whoever has it is watching this and wants to give me that username, I'll take it off your hands. I'm also on Letterboxd as Missing Words, so if you are a film nerd like me and you like watching what other people are watching, you can follow me there. You can see all the movies that I go see and my ratings for them.
Excellent. Well, Matt, thank you so much. I really appreciate it, and I hope to talk to you again soon.
For sure. Thanks.
Well, that wraps it up for this episode of Around the Galaxy. Thank you so much to Matt Martin, and thank you for listening. If you had fun, please like, subscribe, share, rate, and review it. Make sure to follow us on all your social media channels at ATGcast, and go to our website, atgcast.com, for all the information you need about the show, older episodes, and you can also become a patron. Ooh, you can join us live in the studio audience when we record for as little as $3 a month. So head on over to ATGcast for that. Our music is brought to us by the band Silver Colored Knob, a name that makes me laugh every single time I say it. This episode is copyright Pete in the Seat Studios 2021. I'll see you next week. I hope.